Back in 1972, if the numbers on Board Game Geek are to be believed, what was then called Gamma 2 Games released a seminal masterpiece in the world of wargames. It is this game, and this is the 50th anniversary edition of Quebec 1759 from what is now Columbia Games. Quebec 1759 is, in my opinion, one of the more influential games in the history of wargaming. This is the first block wargame, all the way back in the early 1970s. Now, it does say 50th anniversary edition, and this is on Kickstarter right now. I will put a link to that Kickstarter in the video description. And Columbia Games was kind enough to send me a preview copy of the what I expect to be very nice, new 50th anniversary edition of Quebec 1759. If you haven't seen it, Gilbert Collins has at least one video on this game. Gilbert is Canadian. He played it back in the day. I did not. This is the first copy of Quebec 1759 that I will have had. So it is in the pretty standard, hobby standard 2-inch box. I did actually measure these boxes, by the way, and they are in fact 2 inches. They feel just a tiny bit thinner than some other boxes, but that turns out not to be the case. So this is a 2-player game, as the original was. Say it takes about 1 hour. Designed by Tom Dalgleish, Steve Brewster, and Lance Goodrich. We do have a mounted map here, which will be a little bit unusual of a form factor. We will see it in a moment. And there's some additional stuff. So without further delay, let's open her up and see what we get in this fancy new edition of Quebec 1759. And I've mentioned this before, but if you remember the old Columbia Games cardstock game maps that were not mounted, but they were on like a heavy cardstock, I was not a big fan of those, and a lot of other people weren't either. Columbia is not doing those anymore. They're all basically mounted nowadays. So opening this bad boy up here, we will see that we got a Columbia Games pamphlet catalog here, which I have looked through in the last video, so we're not going to look at it again. We have a rule book. I will say again, having mentioned it last time, that the rules for these Columbia Games block games tend to be extremely simple and quite straightforward. This feels like an 8-page rule book. It is indeed an 8-page rule book. So look in this up. Cover by Richard Luchek, by the way. So this is full color, glossy paper. Not a huge number of illustrations, but it's fine. Like I said, this is very straightforward. And the actual rules stop on page 6. The pages 7 and 8 are historical commentary, which I am happy to get because this is not a topic I know a whole lot about. This is, of course, part of what we here in North America tend to call the French and Indian War, which is regarded by many as an extension of the 7 Years' War, which was raging in Europe at the time. This will talk about all of that, and there's another half page of that as well. So, interesting looking right there. We have... I want to break the board out next, even though there's other stuff stacked on top of it. We do have a box spacer, which is you don't see in all of these. We're gonna see that the map is not a standard size, but fortunately, it is smaller than a standard size, so it's not going to be incredibly difficult to put this on any kind of table. It is, at a glance, approximately the same width this way as a standard wargame map, but it is a little over half the distance of a standard wargame map in this direction. So we get 4 6-sided dice, perfectly serviceable 6-sided dice. We get a bag of blocks. So the Columbia block games are, I think, really quite important to the history of wargaming, for one thing. And what you're going to do here is you get a sheet of stickers, okay? It probably is a couple extra. And I will observe, and I've mentioned this before, that the Columbia block game blocks are both bigger and a little bit nicer than everybody else's blocks, because Columbia's been doing this longer than anybody else. So what you'll do is you'll put one of these stickers on one side of each of these blocks, which will then, and I'll actually do it as a demonstration right here. So let's see how bad this looks. There's also a little more leeway on these blocks than there are on some other blocks as well, where it's not quite as finely it's not quite as hard to get the sticker on straight. Let me put it that way. There's a little more buffer around the edges. Anyway, so you're going to have blocks that represent units, and there'll be a sticker on one side of the block. If this is your unit, that side is facing you. If this is the other player's unit, then what you will see is the blank backside, and all you will see is the color. So if, for example, we have this French unit here and the 2 is facing up, then this is a 2 strength rifle unit, or whatever we're calling them in this thing. On the other hand, if you rotate the block, then it's a 1. So whatever number is face up is the strength of the block. And then this will face, it will be stood up on end like that. And if it takes a step loss, you will rotate the block. It's a very simple and elegant system that does, I think, better than a lot of other modern war games at modeling fog of war, among other things. It is a classic mechanic at this point, and there is an entire ecosystem of block war games. A lot of them are by Columbia Games, but GMT has done some. Compass has done some as well, but I'm not positive I would count the ones I've looked at as following this same mechanic quite. There's also this battle board, which has appeared in a number of other of the Columbia block games, where you'll actually, when there's a battle, you will actually fight it out on this. You'll place your blocks on this battle board and fight it out. And again, the system for doing that is very straightforward, and it's a bit of a fistful of dice type of thing. However, in this case, the numbers are all pretty low, so you're not going to be rolling 1,000,000 dice. You're just going to be rolling several dice and resolving your combat and scoring hits. So the map itself, it's a little hard to tell at a glance, is an area map. So you've got an area, and there's 10 areas on the map. You've got Levis, I'm mispronouncing that, Etchemin, Ile-d'Orléans, Montmorency, I guess, Beauport, St. Charles, Abraham, Sillery, Saint Foy, and Cap Rouge. I'm not sure if you can see all of that in frame at the moment. It is possible that you can't. So you're basically moving and conducting battles and stuff from between the different areas. You might look at this and assume that it is a point-to-point map, but it kind of doesn't matter. But there's basically areas. If your units are over here, they're in Abraham. If your units are over here, they're in Levis, and you have adjacent areas. And, of course, there are roads connecting the different places. So you basically, anywhere there's a red name is an area, and you'll cluster your blocks around there. There is if I haven't mentioned it, there is a box spacer in the box. Those are in-game boxes to prevent the components from moving around too much and becoming damaged during shipping. I normally throw them away, and in fact, I have done so with this particular game already, literally before the video has been finished. However, you could easily keep the insert if you wanted, but it's just a plain white insert, so I didn't see any point in that in this case. So, like I said, there is currently, I am going to release this video when the Kickstarter goes live. So I will put a link to the Kickstarter for the 50th anniversary edition of Quebec 1759 in the video description. I think that as a pretty small footprint, pretty short play time, an hour or so. It might take you 2 hours to play the first game or two, but I mean, it's a quick playing game. In addition to being a very straightforward game, I think you could play this with kids or nephews or whatever to introduce them to wargaming. I do not take seriously the comparisons between the Columbia block games and Stratego, although it is basically the same idea, but developed in a much more, to me at least, interesting way. So if you've never played a Columbia block game, check out the link in the video description. These are really nice new editions of the Columbia Games classics that Columbia has been doing in recent years. Columbia is, of course, Gamma 2 Games that originally released the original Quebec 1759 in the early 70s. They changed their name to Columbia around the time that they relocated to Washington State from Canada in something like 1982, give or take a year, something like that. I actually thought that they had changed their name much earlier than that, but I talked to Grant about it, and that is not the case. So, Quebec 1759, brand new from Columbia Games on Kickstarter right now. Check it out.
Massive thanks to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, whose support and encouragement make what we do at Ardwulf's Lair possible. Thank you, patrons. Links to help support the channel are in the video description, so check out the Patreon, the Ko-Fi, and the merch store where you can get snazzy Ardwulf's Lair t-shirts, drinking vessels, and other cool swag. There is also an affiliate link for Noble Knight Games in the video description. If you buy stuff through that affiliate link, it helps to support the channel with Noble Knight store credit. Thank you, Noble Knight. Until next time, thanks for watching, and happy gaming.